Okay, let's dive into this. Welcome to today's explainer. We're looking at a holiday that usually means, a lot of neckties, maybe some hardware store gift cards, and for sure, family barbecues. But behind this very familiar celebration lies a deeply personal, remarkably poignant, and honestly, a surprisingly complex history. Now, did you know that Father's Day was actually started by a woman? No way, right? Well, it's completely true. Even though it's a day entirely dedicated to honoring men, fathers, mentors, all those father figures, the very engine that brought this holiday into existence in the United States was actually a daughter's profound, incredibly urgent sense of gratitude. That daughter was Sonora Smart Dodd. And the spark for all of this? It happened way back in 1909 in Spokane, Washington. Sonora was actually sitting in church, listening to a Mother's Day sermon, when it just hit her. If moms had a dedicated day of recognition, why on earth wasn't there a similar day to honor dads? And her mind instantly went to the man who raised her. Her inspiration was her own dad, William Jackson Smart. Now, William was a Civil War veteran, so you already know he had some serious grit. But the absolute hardest battle of his life began when he became a widower. Tragically, his wife passed away during childbirth, leaving him to navigate the massive, frankly daunting challenge of single parenthood. And we're not talking about raising just one or two kids here. Six. 6 kids. William Smart raised Sonora and her 5 brothers entirely on his own. He literally took on the responsibilities of both parents, working around the clock to keep his family together during some incredibly tough circumstances. Now, what's really interesting about this is the cultural context of the era. We're talking about the early 1900s, right? Back then, society had super rigid views on parenting. Mothers were overwhelmingly seen as the main caregivers, and fathers, they were viewed almost strictly as just providers. But Sonora saw something so different in her dad. William totally broke the mold. He brought discipline, sure, but he combined it with this incredible tenderness and sacrifice. He wasn't just bringing home a paycheck, he was actively nurturing 6 children. To Sonora, that level of commitment absolutely demanded public honor. Section 1. The first celebrations. Let's look at how one woman's personal gratitude mobilized an entire community. So Sonora's original proposal was deeply personal. She actually wanted the celebration to be held on June 5th, which was her father's birthday. It makes perfect sense as a tribute. But logistically, it hit a bit of a snag. The local religious leaders loved the idea and totally wanted to participate, but they simply needed more time to prep their sermons and get the special services ready. Because they needed that extra prep time, the date was bumped slightly to the third Sunday in June. And so on June 19th, 1910, Spokane, Washington, hosted the very first widely recognized Father's Day. It was a massive community event. Churches held special services, pastors preached dedicated sermons on the value of fatherhood, and fathers were publicly honored for everything they do. Now, just to be perfectly historically accurate here, we should note there had been some earlier, kind of isolated efforts to honor dads. For example, in 1908, a church in West Virginia held a beautiful memorial service specifically for fathers who tragically died in a local mining disaster. But that remained a localized memorial. It was Sonora Smart Dodd's 1910 campaign in Washington that truly built the enduring structural foundation for the holiday we celebrate today. Section 2, the road to recognition. And let me tell you, getting this recognized federally was a surprisingly bumpy ride. It literally took over 60 years to overcome the resistance from people who feared the day would become too commercialized. Just think about the timeline here. We start with the first Spokane celebration in 1910. By 1916, President Woodrow Wilson is showing his support, but then crickets for decades. It wasn't until 1966 that President Lyndon B. Johnson finally issued a presidential proclamation for the third Sunday in June, and it took until 1972 1972 for President Richard Nixon to sign it into law. A 60-plus year crawl from a local church event to a permanent national holiday.
Section 3. A global celebration. Let's move outward and see how this built momentum across the entire globe.
The tradition Sonora started spread like wildfire. Tons of countries like Nigeria, the UK, Canada, India, and South Africa, they all adopted that third Sunday in June for their own observances. But you'll also notice that a lot of other countries celebrate on totally different dates. And those variations aren't random. They're deeply tied to unique religious, cultural, or national traditions specific to those regions. The date might shift, but the core sentiment of honoring father figures, that remains identical everywhere.
Section 4. The modern meaning. Let's talk about fatherhood today.
Over the last century, our understanding of what makes a father has wonderfully expanded. It's no longer strictly about biological ties. The crucial point here is that we now recognize fatherhood as this incredibly rich, multidimensional role. It's relational, emotional, moral, and spiritual. We are celebrating the stepfathers, grandfathers, pastors, mentors, men who don't just provide a roof and food, but who actively protect, teach, discipline, encourage, and sacrifice for their families on a daily basis. And we see this depth of meaning beautifully illustrated in various cultures around the world. For instance, in many African societies, including Nigeria, Father's Day carries incredible additional weight. In these contexts, fatherhood is inextricably linked with family identity, provision, protection, wise counsel, and importantly, legacy. It's about building character and laying down a solid moral foundation that will support generations to come. When you trace this whole shebang back to its roots, we uncover a very simple but profoundly powerful lesson. It's captured perfectly right here. Appreciation should not be postponed. Sonora Smart Dodd didn't wait. She felt this urgent need to show gratitude for her dad's massive sacrifices, and she acted on it immediately. And now, more than a century later, that one simple, localized act of remembrance has transformed into a massive global day of gratitude. Which leaves us with a final, really important question to ponder as we wrap up today's explainer. Who are the father figures you need to appreciate today? Think about the men who have stepped up to nurture you, teach you, protect you, and help build your character. Don't postpone that appreciation. Reach out to them. Thank you so much for joining me for this dive into the source material, and I really hope this gives you a whole new perspective the next time Father's Day rolls around.
Please like, share, and subscribe to Master Sense by Faraday, and turn on notifications so you don't miss new and upcoming videos. Drop a comment below and tell us what you'd like to see next.